Aloha and welcome to Ehana Kako. We're here every week on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute. One of the things we care deeply about here in the state of Hawaii is our economy. We want a robust economy. More than that, we want a free economy. But what exactly does a free economy look like? Well, there are some folks who do some extensive study of what freedom in economics is all about. And I'm very privileged today to have as our guest the manager of the Economic Freedom of the World project that is published by Fraser Institute. He understands what's going on all across the world in terms of this concept of economic freedom. And I think you're going to learn a lot today from him. Please welcome to the program today my good friend, Dr. Fred McMahon. Fred, aloha from Hawaii. How are you?
Fine. It's a great pleasure and honor to be on.
Well, you're a Canadian, but are you in Canada now or are you in the United States?
I'm actually in Toronto at the moment.
Well, very good. You work with such an exciting organization, the Fraser Institute. You want to say a couple of words about Fraser Institute right at the outset?
The Fraser Institute's Canada's largest independent think tank. We have about 40 to 50 employees, depending on how you count them. We're the highest ranked think tank in Canada. And the Economic Freedom of the World report is the fifth highest rated think tank publication in the world.
Wow. Well, you know, I'm impressed tremendously with the work that goes into the Economic Freedom of the World, as well as your companion publication, the Economic Freedom of North America. And I'm just very privileged to be part of that process with you, the Economic Freedom of North America. And thank you for the opportunity to consult and take part in that. We at the Grassroot Institute of Hawaii benefit from it greatly. Fred, right at the beginning, just would you say for our viewers what we mean by economic freedom? We have many kinds of freedoms. We have individual liberties, we have our civil rights, we have human rights, other types of freedoms that are secured in democratic nations. But it's not that often that people talk about economic freedom. What exactly do we mean by economic freedom?
Economic freedom is very similar to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. It means you can do what you wish economically without being stopped by an overly large government or a corrupt elite, as you see in Russia, to the Arab world, in America. What that means is that taxes are reasonable if government takes away too much of money, property, through taxation, reduces your economic freedom. Rule of law, which is the fundamental infrastructure of economic freedom. Otherwise, the rich and powerful use their power and their wealth to deprive others of economic freedom for their own advantage. Sound money, government doesn't appropriate your property through inflation. Freedom to trade. You need the world as your marketplace. Not just a freedom, it's a necessity. And regulation. You should be able to hire whom you wish, work for whom you wish, or whom you wish, lend to whom you wish, start a business and close the business when you wish. All those things on regulation are actually somewhat denied or largely denied in many parts of the world.
Well, I appreciate the rundown you've given us. You've, in some ways, just given us a succinct list of the criteria that go into the economic freedom reports. You mentioned the size and role of government, the legal structure, property rights, money itself and how sound it is, freedom to trade internationally, and regulations. We'll come back to some of those, but Fred, before we get into the technical things about economic freedom, what is the benefit of it? Why are we concerned about economic freedom beyond merely being able to do what we want to do? The research data shows that there are some benefits that accrue to those nations that have the higher levels of economic freedom. What would some of those benefits be, or what would one be?
Immense benefits all across the board. Most people tend to think of economic freedom as something that generates prosperity and growth. Mm-hmm. And that's true. The type and ingenuity of individuals making their own decisions, is hugely more productive than crony capitalism, crony socialism. Many other benefits, too, in the way society is organized.
One of the concerns that people often have is the disparity of income between the rich and the poor. It seems that in some nations, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But you're tracking what's happening to the poor and the middle class in nations that have economic freedom. And I want to read a figure that comes from the most recent report. Nations in the top quarter of economic freedom, the top quartile, have an average per capita GDP, gross domestic product, of $38,600. That's per person. Whereas those in the bottom quarter have only $6,900 per capita income. Is this one of the outcomes of economic freedom, that actually the poor are actually better off in economically free nations than they are in economically non-free nations?
Hugely better off in economically free nations. That's where you'd rather be poor. In Canada or the United States or Pakistan or Bangladesh or Nigeria or Venezuela. The numbers are that the quarter most economically free nation, the average income of the poorest 10% is a little over around $10,000 US. That's higher than the per capita GDP of most nations.
Right.
The average income of the poorest 10% in the least free nation is around $1,000.
Well, another figure that we have from the report is that in the top quartile of the economically free nations, the average income of the poorest 10% was $10,000, as you mentioned, $9,881, compared to only $1,600 for those nations in the bottom quartile. So we really are looking at something that has an impact upon poverty and well-being of all across the board.
We mentioned something about inequality, which you had brought up earlier. Economic freedom doesn't seem to reduce inequality. The level of inequality is about the same in economically free as non-economically free nations. It's important because it means that despite what people say, economic freedoms, free markets do not generate more inequality than other systems. But they generate so much more wealth that the poor
That's
are
right.
substantially better off.
There are also some non-economic figures that we track as well, such as life expectancy. Your report shows that expectancy of those individuals in the top quartile of economic freedom is 80.1 years, whereas in the bottom quarter, it's 63.1. How does that work?
Well, by the way, let me say I'm immensely grateful for that. I am precisely 63 years, so I'm glad I'm living in an economically free nation where my life expectancy is 80. There are many, many reasons for it. I mean, part of it is that for prosperity, you can afford better food, better health care, you feel better about yourself. All these things add to lifestyle. By the way, one interesting thing to add to that is that our friends on the left, those like powerful government, used to be arguing, well, prosperity is it's how happy you are. And you could be happy in a dog-eat-dog capitalist world. With the research on happiness or life satisfaction, the term kind of interchangeable in the literature, actually shows that economic freedom provides happiness. For me, when you correct for income, are happier than those who are economically free. In other words, you like making your own decisions. Yes.
Well, we also have benefits that accrue in terms of political rights as well as human rights. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? There seems to be a correlation between economic freedom and these types of rights as well, isn't there?
Very strong population, and related to that is a very strong correlation between civic less infant in places that are economically free. That's fairly easy to understand. If you live in a non-economically free government, there are either crony capitalists or crony socialists who control the economic system. Becoming part of the winning team is everything. Whether you can get a job, whether you can head, where you live, it's not a political decision. The so important identity decision. As people grab for power, it's group against group, and you can see that all too often in the world. In an economically free system where you make your own decisions, the only way to get ahead is to produce goods and services that other people voluntarily want to buy. That means you have to have the best employees. For ethnic groups are from. Different ethnic groups become your suppliers, your customers, your employees. Well, lack of economic freedom and the quest for power, as it means everything, divides group against group. With economic freedom, you actually cut across those lines.
Well,
and if you look around the world, you can easily see economically free countries.
Right.
And social strife.
Well, we're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we're going to get into the numbers, the rankings, and see where the United States and, well, I'll throw in Canada, rank in terms of economic freedom, as well as who the heavy hitters are that have the most economic freedom in the world and who the losers on the scorecard happen to be, the ones who don't have much economic freedom. So don't go away. I'll be back right here with Fred McMahon after this short message.
Aloha. My name is Danelia, Danelia.
And I'm the other half of the duo, John Newman. Aloha.
We are the co-hosts of Keys to Success, which is live on the Think Tech live streaming network series, weeklies on Thursdays at 11 a.m.
Aloha. My name is Carl Campagna. I am the host of Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. We hope you join us every Wednesday at noon right here at Think Tech Hawaii, as well as on OC16. Our show covers a range of important topics regarding education, our educational system, where we are, where we're going, where we need to go, and some of the important people that are working on that, from state legislators to department heads to teachers and students. We bring in everyone we possibly can to have a comprehensive conversation about the educational system here in Hawaii. So we hope you join us again every Wednesday at noon here on Think Tech Hawaii. Mahalo.
Aloha and welcome to Tech Hawaii. I am Ina Chang. I am the guest host for Small Business Hawaii with Reg Baker. Tune in every Thursday at 2 p.m. and watch us. Aloha.
Hello, I'm Patrick Bratton. Please join me every Thursday at 1 o'clock for Global Connections, where I talk to a variety of guests and range through many issues from contemporary, international, political events, things talking about national security, all sorts of international issues, and also more local issues, history, and so on. I look forward to having you join me and talking with some of my guests. Thank you.
Well, we're back for the second portion of our weekly E Hana Kako program. E Hana Kako, that means let's work together. Let's work together to build a better economy, government, and society. And one of the things we do at the Grassroot Institute is collaborate with think tanks across the world. We're privileged to partner with the Fraser Institute in Canada. Fred McMahon is there, and he directs their Economic Freedom of the World report. We're going to dive right back into that with Dr. McMahon. Fred, let's go down the numbers now. Some people might be surprised that in the top 10 listing, the United States doesn't show up. We've got it at the head of the list for economic freedom. Hong Kong and Singapore, they usually take those two top positions. Other names include in the top 10 New Zealand, Switzerland, the United Arab Emirates, Mauritius, Jordan, Ireland, Canada, the United Kingdom, Chile, tied for 10th position. But the United States isn't there in the top 10. So let me ask you to address that. Is that a Canadian grudge at work over here? Or are there some reasons that the United States is close to the top 10, but it doesn't make it in?
was quite a surprise for us in Canada to discover that we now were ahead of the United States in the Economic Freedom Index. Our earliest data goes back to 1970, and up until 3 years ago, the United States was always ahead of Canada, and up until about 10 years ago, substantially ahead of Canada, often only behind Hong Kong and Singapore. You know, the United States has been declining significantly, and this is a nonpartisan issue. It happened under George Bush just as it's happened under Barack Obama.
You know, we're talking about a handful of variables that we look at very, very closely, and maybe just listing those variables will give us some insight into the United States position. We look at the size of government, and I would imagine that United States government has grown immensely since the period we've begun to report the economic freedom ranking. We look at legal structures such as the protection of property rights. We look at access to sound money. We look at the freedom to trade internationally and regulation itself involving credit, labor, and business. Which of these factors are responsible for the United States' lower ranking in terms of economic freedom, Fred?
Well, you're quite right. The United States has declined in size of government. The government is spending more, thus reducing the space for free exchange. But the United States is still actually ahead of Canada in that category. Where the United States has hugely declined is in freedom to trade, and even worse, in the legal system and property rights.
Now, I know an issue that's important to us here in Hawaii is the Jones Act, a form of shipping protectionism. I don't think we numerically translate that into our report, but we do have a narrative description of that. Care to comment about that?
Well, you know, trade is one of the most important drivers of economic growth. And anything like the Jones Act, I mean, trade involves getting goods from one place to another. And anything that, like the Jones Act, that hinders that is a hindrance to free trade. So it is a problem for economic freedom.
Well, let's go to the top of the list, Hong Kong and Singapore, which wouldn't surprise anyone intuitively, but you look at it analytically. What puts Hong Kong and Singapore right there at the top of the world's list of economically free nations, or zones, I should say?
Okay. Well, Hong Kong and Singapore, just let me first mention one way in which they're very unusual. As we discussed earlier, economic freedom is closely tied to other freedoms and to democracy because of the way it affects the dynamic of society. Most economically free nations, Hong Kong and Singapore, really stand out not being democratic. That said, Singapore is more democratic than most Asian nations, and Hong Kong would have been democratic had it not been taken over by China. How do they stand out? Relatively small government. They don't take a lot of your property. They have firm rule of law, fair rule of law. They are open to trade with the world, and they know how important it is for their well-being. And they aren't tied up in bureaucracy and red tape.
There are some countries on this list that are of particular interest to many of us here in Hawaii. The United States ranks, of course, 16th on the list. Japan ranks number 26 and South Korea 39th. 26 for Japan and 39th for South Korea. Any thoughts about those two nations and why they get, I'd say, C+ ratings on the Economic Freedom of the World Report?
Well, they still have a lot of barriers in their economy. South Korea still interferes with its economy. You know, it's very interesting. People often point to South Korea as what they imagined as some sort of government-directed economy. It's not that at all. Much, much freer than its neighbors and much, much more prosperous. But then you compare South Korea to Singapore, which is number 2 on the list and in the same region. And South Korea's per capita GDP for a small place with no resources and not a huge population, I think about a third time greater than South Korea. So even at that level, the amount of economic freedom you have is an important determinant of your prosperity.
Now, in Europe, with the European Economic Union, we have seen some things that are pleasing economically and some that are not. Germany is now ranked 29th. Italy is 68th. France is 70th. What's going on in terms of economic freedom in Europe?
The places in Europe that lack economic freedom, France, Greece, Italy, are the ones that have been the hardest hit by the economic recession. Those that have economic freedom, Switzerland, which is in the top 10, the United Kingdom, and Ireland have all done very well. Even in the case of Ireland, which was badly hit by a property bubble, it's still doing a whole bunch better than Italy or France, and is recovering very strongly. So again, see that correlation.
If we go to the bottom of the list, we will read Syria, Chad, Libya, the Republic of the Congo, and in last place, Venezuela. What are the factors that put countries at the very bottom of the list of economic freedom?
Well, first, just let me say, Venezuela is a real tragedy. It didn't have to be that way. I remember when the media all throughout Canada, and I suspect the United States, was heralding Hugo Chavez as a great liberator of the left, and failing to note huge economic damage he was doing. They've whittled away the legal system and property rights so it favors Chavistas. It wasn't good to start with. They virtually destroyed it. They tied up their economy in red tape and unnecessary bureaucracy so that they could, one, give jobs to people who politically support them, and two, those people who get the jobs and politically support them, and then take bribes from everybody who needs something from government, like starting a business or shutting one. They tried to shut their country off to trade. It's a nation of 10 million people. It can't be prosperous without trade. Unnecessary damage and mistake Hugo Chavez and his government and followers have caused to Venezuela is, again, a human-made unnecessary tragedy.
That's right. That's right. You know, some of these lessons and values related to economic freedom may seem a little esoteric and removed from us in our local economy. And that's why I'm so glad that the Fraser Institute also puts out the economic freedom of North America as a companion to the economic freedom of the world. And that research project, Economic Freedom of the North America, involves both rankings of countries themselves in North America and a subnational ranking of the states within those countries. So I thought it was quite amusing this year, or at least it will be the case when you release the 2016 edition. It will be quite amusing to see that there are 3 states in Mexico that are ranked with higher economic freedom than Hawaii itself. I know one of those is a little bit of an anomaly because I think it's basically destroyed its own government, so it shrunk in the size of the government. But still, I thought that was kind of funny. The United States rankings put Hawaii as 46 amongst the 50 states in terms of economic freedom. What do the people of Hawaii need to be concerned about here, Fred?
Well, they need to be concerned about the size of their government, amount of taxes that they layer on the people of Hawaii, the amount Hawaii spends, and its regulation. You know, and a great deal of research using the economic freedom of North America, and economic freedom is associated with higher job growth, higher prosperity, any number of good factors. One thing that economic freedom can't change is the weather, and maybe you get to trump the rest of the United States there.
Well, maybe we're out surfing and enjoying the weather so much that we're not working on the economy enough, but we have a lot of learning to do, and one of the things we could do is learn from the states that rank high on the Economic Freedom Report, such as the top 5, New Hampshire, South Dakota, Texas and Florida tied for 3rd, and Tennessee. What lesson could Hawaii learn from one or more of these states, Fred?
They can learn a lot, but just let me mention something that's very interesting when you read out that list. There's no commonality. All the economically free states are not stuck in the South, or the Northeast, or the West. They're spread all over.
And they're not all oil rich.
Exactly. In fact, most of them aren't. So it shows that any state, including Hawaii, can increase economic freedom. And it's not just good for prosperity of the people of Hawaii, it's intrinsically, it's better to be free and make your own decisions than not. So again, it's looking at regulation.
We've only got a minute left here, and at the bottom of the list, we've got North Carolina, California, Alaska, Hawaii, of course. What bad lesson should we avoid, real quickly, from these states?
Just like California lived on the capital they built up in the past. So they looked successful even as their economic declines. But California, for an example, is a deeply declining state. Alaska could save itself with its oil. Now that's gone. We could run down the list, but that's a typical sort of lesson.
Well, Fred, I believe the website freetheworld.com has all of these reports. Is that the correct website, freetheworld.com?
Exactly.
Well, that's great. I want to thank you so much, both for the work that you do in measuring economic freedom and for being our guest today. Thank you very much, Dr. Fred McMahon. Aloha to you.
My pleasure. Aloha.
Well, my guest today was Dr. Fred McMahon of the Fraser Institute. He manages the Economic Freedom of the World Project, and he measures economic freedom across the world. That's so important for us to have some kind of barometer by which we can tell how well we're doing. There are many lessons to learn here in Hawaii and lessons to apply. Until next week on Ehana Kako, I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute, thanking you for being here and thanking ThinkTech Hawaii for broadcasting this. Aloha.